Imagine looking at a single, microscopic green leaf under a magnifying glass. You're noticing the exact shape of it.
Yeah, like how it's almost perfectly egg-shaped.
Exactly. And how the edges kind of curve gently downward toward the soil. It feels like this quiet, isolated moment of observation. But then you take a step back, and another step.
And suddenly you realize that this one little leaf isn't just a leaf.
Right. It is actually one tiny data point inside this towering 15-year-old architectural marvel. I mean, it's an open-source masterclass on how to build a relentlessly curious mind.
It's the ultimate shift in perspective, really. You're forced to go from the micro to the macro. And in doing so, you realize that the way we observe the smallest details in our lives often reveals the entire blueprint of how we process the world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're doing a deep dive into a single entry from a personal blog. The site is qianmengmeng.org. So the specific post we're looking at was published on March 14th, 2026. It's titled, Notes on Gardening Part 835, Time to Move My Basil Seedlings. And the author is a creator named Ang, who describes himself in his bio simply as an old software plumber.
Which is such a great phrase.
It really is.
Right.
And on the surface, you read this post and think, well, it's just a quick, mundane post about a household plant. But when we start peeling back the layers of this one post...
And look at the massive digital footprint surrounding it.
Exactly. We uncover a fascinating framework for lifelong learning, intense consistency, and, deep cross-disciplinary curiosity.
Because while our entry point today happens to be dirt and gardening trays, what we're actually analyzing is the structural architecture of a specific type of thinker. We are looking at how a highly technical mind encounters the organic world.
And the mechanisms he uses to make sense of it all. So I want to start right there, with how he encounters that organic world. Looking at the actual facts of this March 14th post, Ang writes that his basil seedlings are growing fast and healthy.
They've reached a point where he needs to transplant them.
Right, into individual compartments in a larger seedling tray. Specifically, an older tray he bought, as he phrases it, quite some moons ago.
Which, on the face of it, is a completely standard gardening chore, you know? Anyone who has ever bought a packet of seeds has probably dealt with the exact same logistical problem of outgrowing a starter pot.
But it's the mechanism of his observation that caught my eye. He doesn't just look at the tray and say, well, it looks like the basil is getting big. He goes into full diagnostic mode.
He really does.
He is trying to figure out exactly what kind of basil he's actually growing, because apparently there was some ambiguity there. So he looks closely at the shape and the texture of what he calls the true leaves.
And he specifically notes that they are ovate, meaning egg-shaped.
Yeah, and that they are curved downward.
He is essentially running a visual algorithm. He's looking for highly specific morphological markers to categorize the data right in front of him.
And it works. Based on that specific ovate shape, he deduces that he is growing sweet basil. He properly identifies it with its Latin name, Ocimum basilicum. He realizes he is not growing Thai basil, which is Ocimum basilicum var. Thyrsophilora.
I think you nailed the pronunciation there.
Thank you, I tried. And he even throws in a little personal aesthetic judgment, noting that while he has nothing against sweet basil, Thai basil just has a higher aesthetic value in his opinion.
Naturally.
But reading this, I couldn't help but think about his day job as a software plumber. Transplanting these seedlings feels exactly like a developer migrating code.
Oh, how do you mean?
Well, think about a testing sandbox in software development. That's the little starter seedling tray. Everything is just sprouting. It's a bit chaotic. The code is just proving that it can compile and run.
Right, but now it's getting too big.
Yeah, it's getting complex. And you need to migrate it into a structured individual production environment where it can actually scale. And his meticulous approach to looking at those true leaves, it genuinely feels like a programmer debugging a system.
He isn't just gardening, he's reading the documentation of the plant.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is how the boundary between his professional technical background and his organic physical hobbies completely dissolves. He's applying scientific taxonomic observation to an everyday household chore. By taking the time to observe the ovate shape, and by taking the time to look up and use the precise Latin classifications, he elevates the act of watering a plant into a deliberate act of learning.
He's not passively watching something grow.
No, he is actively trying to understand its fundamental properties and its place in a broader taxonomy.
I do have to push back a little on that, though. Why go through the trouble of logging the Latin name on a personal blog? I mean, if it's just for him, isn't it enough to just know it's sweet basil? Why the rigid taxonomy?
Well, because a rigid taxonomy creates a universal framework for understanding. When you use the Latin classification, Ocimum basilicum, you are connecting your tiny, isolated household plant to the entire global historical database of botany.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah, you aren't just a guy with a pot of bird anymore. You are a node in a much larger network of scientific observation. And for a software developer, naming conventions are everything.
And if you misname a variable in code, the system breaks.
Exactly. If you miscategorize a plant, you might misunderstand its light requirements, its water needs, or its growth cycle. He is applying the rigor of code syntax to the biology of his living room.
That active, rigorous mindset actually leads him to a really interesting realization at the end of the post. He mentions that he has all these underutilized seedling trays just sitting around, trays he used back when he used to really indulge in seed germination projects.
Oh, right.
He notes that it's a bit of a waste to let them sit there gathering dust, and it sparks this desire to revisit those old projects, assuming he can remember where he put the seeds, of course.
It perfectly illustrates how physical environments can trigger dormant intellectual pursuits. The physical accumulation of these past projects, these dusty seedling trays, they're essentially waiting to be brought back online.
And that physical accumulation perfectly mirrors his digital life.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the sidebar of this blog, you realize very quickly that his past digital projects are absolutely not gathering dust.
They are meticulously cataloged.
Yeah, which made me want to zoom out from the Basil seedlings and look at the actual identity of this old software plumber. His bio says his journal is full of his night-long tinkering with free, Libre, and open-source software, or FLAW. But his projects list is wildly, almost intimidatingly expansive.
It requires a massive amount of cognitive flexibility to maintain the breadth of topics he covers.
Just to give you an idea of the variety, he has these ongoing notes on series. He's notes on gardening, which we saw, but also notes on photography, fish keeping, typesetting, meditation, dieting, home improvement, and guitar.
And that's just the lifestyle stuff.
Right. When you look at his technical deep dives, he's tracking his work in Python, Elixir, and Erlang, AI, Haskell, Go, Rust. He has Perl weekly challenges.
Incredible.
He even has highly specific tracking mechanisms for his aquatic life, like betta spawn logs and Miss Fish's spawn logs.
Yeah. He is literally logging the mating habits and environmental conditions of his fish alongside his notes on functional programming languages.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to throw this over to you. Looking at this massive, highly structured list, keeping detailed spawn logs for a fish tank, or writing 835 separate posts about gardening, doesn't this run the risk of turning a relaxing hobby into a crushing chore?
That's a fair point.
I mean, for most people, having to write a technical manual on their fish tank's pH levels would completely ruin the joy of just watching the fish. Is it possible that for a software plumber, the documentation is the actual hobby?
That is the core tension of this entire archive, honestly.
Yeah.
To understand why documenting the pH of a fish tank doesn't ruin the fun for him, we have to look closely at the underlying mechanics of his value system.
Okay.
If you look at the blog sidebar, he explicitly lists the organizations he supports financially or philosophically. He lists the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Free Software Foundation, the Software Freedom Conservancy, the Tor Project, and Wikipedia.
Those are all heavy hitters in the open source and digital rights world. They are fundamentally about keeping information free and accessible.
Exactly. When you analyze that list, a clear philosophy emerges. This author believes deeply in the open source ethos, and that ethos doesn't just apply to software code.
It applies to knowledge itself.
Yes. He isn't just gardening or keeping fish in isolation. He is essentially open sourcing his personal life data. His disclaimer at the bottom of the site explicitly states that all content is for informational purposes only.
Wow.
He is treating his own lived experience, his own trial and error, as a repository of knowledge to be given away to the public.
So by logging the ovate shape of a basil leaf or the temperature of a betta fish tank, he's contributing a tiny line of code to the open source project of human knowledge.
Precisely. In the open source world, if you encounter a bug, you document it so the next developer doesn't make the same mistake.
So if Eng's basil plant dies because of overwatering, that's not a personal failure to feel bad about.
It's a logged bug. The documentation isn't a chore that gets in the way of the hobby. The documentation is the mechanism that extracts value from the hobby.
But treating your life like an open source database is only useful if there's enough data to actually pull from. Which made me wonder, how much data is this guy actually generating? because the consistency here is almost difficult to wrap your head around.
The sheer volume of output is a monument to incremental discipline.
Let's look at the actual timeline. The blog spans continuously from July 2011 to March 2026. That is 15 years of continuous documented thought.
Amazing.
And the output doesn't just trickle out either. In the years 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025, he published over 730 posts per year.
That averages out to 2 posts every single day. For 4 years straight.
No vacations, no weekends off, just relentless daily documentation. And he hasn't slowed down. In just the first half of March 2026, the month we're looking at with the Basil post, he has already published 42 posts. And I have to admit, looking at the timeline of those posts gave me a bit of whiplash. How does a human brain jump from highly abstract concepts to physical chores in the exact same week without frying?
What did that specific March timeline look like?
Okay, just looking at a tiny slice of that month, he publishes Notes on Haskell Programming Part 82, on handling whatever the code was. And then his very next post is Notes on Dieting Part 116, Is Eating Fish Better? And then he jumps right to Notes on Photography Part 233, Why I'm Sticking, and then Notes on Fish Keeping Part 207, Switching to New.
He is context switching from functional programming languages to dietary habits to camera equipment to aquarium water back to back.
Yes.
Which brings up the crucial question of mechanism. How does he process this without it just being a chaotic brain dump?
Exactly. If I tried to log every single thought I had about every single interest, it would just be noise. It would be a messy, unsearchable diary. So how does he actually synthesize this?
He synthesizes it by building an architecture of review. If you dig into his projects list, you'll see he utilizes what he calls a now page.
Oh, like the concept started by Derek Sivers.
Yeah.
Just a static page telling you what the person is focused on right at this exact moment.
Yes, it forces prioritization, but he goes much further than that. He has specific, dedicated categories for this week in review, this month in review, and this year in review.
I see.
This is the key mechanism. He isn't just mindlessly dumping data into the void. He has built a highly structured system for continuous iteration. He does something, he documents it in the daily posts, and then he specifically sets aside time weekly, monthly, and yearly to aggregate that raw data into actual insights.
So what does this all mean? When I look at how his system actually works, it changes how I view the whole blog. At first, I thought of it like a coral reef, one tiny polyp, like a post about a curved basil leaf. Seems insignificant.
Yeah.
But layer upon layer for 15 years, it creates this massive structure. But a coral reef is static. What you're describing sounds much more active. It's almost like he is training his own personal machine learning model.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. Walk me through that.
Well, think about how an AI is trained. You feed it massive amounts of raw data. In Aang's case, the raw data is the daily posts. It's the observation of the ovate leaf, the logging of the fish tank pH, the notes on a line of Haskell code?
Right. Each daily post is a new weight or parameter being fed into the system.
Exactly. But raw data alone doesn't make an AI smart. It needs training loop. It needs to run back propagation to adjust its understanding based on that data.
And in this analogy, his week in review and year in review posts are the training loop.
Yes. That's the mechanism where he steps back, looks at the 14 posts he wrote that week, and asks, what are the patterns here? What actually worked, what failed? He is constantly updating the algorithm of his own brain.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the profound difference between an amateur interest and true lifelong learning. We often trick ourselves into thinking that learning happens in massive, sweeping breakthroughs. We think we need to read a 500-page textbook or take a 3-month intensive boot camp to master a subject. But what Aang's archive proves is that profound expertise is actually built through microscopic, daily interactions with your environment, combined with a relentless system of review.
Which really makes me want to pause and ask you, the listener, to reflect on your own habits for a second. Think about the last time you went down a massive Wikipedia rabbit hole at 3 a.m. Or think about the notes you furiously scribbled down while prepping for a big meeting last month.
You absorbed all that raw data.
And you probably had some great insights in the moment. But what happened to them by Tuesday? Do those insights just evaporate? Do your notes gather dust, just like Aang's old seedling trays?
Yeah, or do you have an actual mechanism in place to document them, review them, and train your own mental model over time?
Exactly.
Most of us suffer from massive data loss in our own lives because we lack that archiving structure. We rely on our raw memory, which is deeply flawed. Aang relies on his system.
Which brings us all the way back to where we started. Our mission today was to unpack a very simple, seemingly mundane journal entry about a household plant. We started by looking incredibly closely at the downward curve of an ovate sweet basil leaf.
But by pulling back the curtain on that single moment of taxonomic observation, we discovered a 15-year masterclass.
We found a developer whose open-source philosophy extends far beyond his computer screen. He applies a relentless daily algorithm of documentation and review to every single facet of his life, from the abstraction of Haskell programming to the biological realities of his bed of fish.
And there's one final crucial element to take away from this architecture of curiosity. It's the hidden value of maintaining such diverse perspectives.
How so?
When you maintain a rigorous, documented system across completely unrelated fields, a magical thing happens. You begin to experience profound cross-pollination.
How exactly does that cross-pollination work in practice? Like, how does coding talk to gardening?
Think about the underlying logic of the disciplines. A highly abstract functional programming language like Haskell relies on pure functions and avoiding side effects within a system.
Right.
While a closed aquatic ecosystem, like a bed of fish tank, is entirely about managing biological side effects. If you understand the logical framework of one, you can map that mental model onto the other.
That is fascinating.
The debugging mindset of a software plumber gets applied to the taxonomy of a basil plant. The rigid structures of code help organize the chaos of nature, and the organic, unpredictable realities of nature introduce necessary flexibility into the rigid world of code.
They inform and elevate each other.
Exactly. Cross-pollination is the ultimate reward of the multidisciplinary learner.
It all feeds the exact same soil. And that leaves us with a final lingering thought for you to mull over today. Think about all the fleeting thoughts, the minor frustrations, the random hobbies you pick up and drop, the casual learnings you experience on a daily basis. If you were to adopt this open source mindset, if you were to build your own Now page and publicly log your daily micro-obsessions starting tomorrow, no matter how trivial they seem in the moment, what unexpected patterns would emerge in your own archive a decade from now?
Would you be surprised by the true shape of your own curiosity?
Because who knows, your own dusty seedling trays might just hold the blueprint for an entirely new way of seeing the world.